Oh, it's now I'm sorry. Hi everyone, this is Caitlin back with Grass-Fed Girl, and today we have Brett Lloyd. He's going to be telling us all about his journey with carnivore for his mental health and the transformation that he's gone through with eating a meat-based diet. So we're excited. Thank you, Brett, for coming on today.
Oh, thanks so much, Caitlin, for having me. It's a pleasure to speak with you and your audience, and I look forward to this. We're going to have a good time.
Good. Well, so Brett is at thankful.carnivore on Instagram, so you guys can follow him there in his journey. And so Brett, tell us how you got started with carnivore and what was the breaking point for you and how did you hear about it and all that?
Well, I'll go back to the beginning here. I grew up in a household. We had standard American diet. My parents had an enormous vegetable garden, so we had fresh vegetables year round that were either fresh picked that day or mom and dad had canned them. We ate plenty of meat. I mean, it was textbook standard American diet. There were four of us. And out of the four of us, my dad, he's near the end of his life due to type 2 diabetes, and he had prostate cancer, which he did manage to survive, thankfully. My sister's got my little baby sister's got suffers from ulcerative colitis. My mom's had more health issues than I could even gallbladder, just all of her life she's had metabolic-ish problems. And I suffered from severe clinical depression, anxiety, and insomnia for over 40 years. I was first diagnosed in 1990 with major depression, and I want to share a little bit about what depression for me was like, because depression is very specific to the individual. I was an angry, depressed person. I had an extreme dissatisfaction with everything I saw, everything about me, about you, about anybody who got within my sphere of influence. There was something to be dissatisfied with, and then underneath that was a vast, enormous sadness that went along with not feeling like I was good enough. Most of the dissatisfaction was with myself, and I got into this when I was first diagnosed. They were like, "Oh, here's some behavioral things you can do," and then a few years went by, and I just started getting a little worse, and they put me on medications. In 1995, I started taking Prozac, and that began what I call this illness wellness cycle. And I would do pretty good for a while. A couple of years, I was doing all right on Prozac. I was a very compliant somebody. I always took my meds, and I researched them to make sure I understood what they did, side effects to look out for, etc. But then out of nowhere, my mood would just crater. And there might be an extenuating reason, death of a family member or close friend, or there might be nothing. And my wife and I would be like, well, what's this all about? That's kind of bizarre. And this just increased over time. And then I would talk to my physician. Hey, let's increase your Prozac. You'll be okay. Uh, and my diet through all this time was garbage. I mean, standard American diet growing up. In my 20s, typical young college student, it was beer and pizza. And then as an adult after college, it was basically beer, pizza, and potato chips. So, and then as my depression symptoms increased, then I wouldn't call it comfort eating. I think it was more pleasure seeking. It wasn't that I found comfort. I was very much a pleasure seeker through the early years of it was like, that was what treated it. It was like medication, let's say, was the quest for pleasure. And you can just imagine all the scenarios and nightmares that could create for somebody over time. But then I was blessed to meet my current wife, and she was a very stabilizing, positive force, but I still got sicker. And I would part of what would happen with me is I became more and more unable to perceive reality accurately. For instance, my wife would say to me, "Oh, it's a beautiful Sunday morning." It's just that kind of tone of voice. But what I heard would be, "Yeah, it's a beautiful Sunday morning. You're right." And I would hear that. Now, I love my wife. That didn't sound like she was in a good space. So what does a caring, loving husband do? I said, what do you mean? What's wrong? And she would look at me like, I said, it's a beautiful Sunday day. And I would still hear it. I told you it's a beautiful day. I mean, look at it. That would be my perception of it. So you can imagine the conflict that would arise out of that. She would try to converse with me like a sane person, but she wasn't dealing with a sane person. And she was not educated enough or experienced to have a clue on how to deal with it. I was oblivious. I thought I was right. I thought what I was perceiving was accurate. And so that's one of the horrible things about depression. It's so insidious. It's like I spoke to you earlier about, you kind of know when you got it. You can't be halfway sort of kind of depressed. It's like being halfway sort of pregnant. No, or at least for me specifically, it was not like that at all. And this constant inability to communicate began to, was a performing musician for 30 years. Well, in order to work with other musicians, you've got to be able to communicate, and they kind of want to be around you.
Yeah.
Well, I have pictures on my Facebook page from when I was performing. Now, internally, I was having a blast, but you could see the illness written all over me. I looked like I'm furious. And over a period of time, I'd be in these fantastic bands, would be sounding great, making money, working a lot. And they would and I would think things were perfect. I didn't have a problem with anybody. And I'd get a phone call, "Why don't you just stay home tonight? You're just too hard to get along with." And I'm oblivious to this. I'm not. I wanted to be a nice person. I was completely oblivious to how I was coming across to other people, and it was the illness at play, and it was never everything. Things could be altered just a little bit or by a whole bunch, but it was never in my favor. It was always against me, and a familial event
sounds like you were kind of maybe paranoid a little bit.
Well, there was maybe some of that in there as it progressed. I mean, in 2006, due to a familial event that I don't get too specific about, I had your old-fashioned classic nervous breakdown. I didn't sleep more than 2 hours, an hour or two a night for like 6 weeks. And when you don't sleep for that long, very bad things start to happen. My diagnosis got changed to major depression with psychotic features.
That's so specific.
Well, you start hearing children in the yard playing when there's nobody home. That's not a good thing. Those were the kinds of things I was beginning to experience because of the sleep deprivation and the depression, and then anxiety started getting cranked up into all this. And they put me on this medicine called Remeron, and that got me a couple of weeks of sleep. And I also gained like 15 pounds in like 2 weeks. I mean, this stuff is just horrible about putting weight on you. And then I went another 6 weeks with only 1 or 2 hours of sleep. And my mood.
Did they give you some sleeping pills?
Oh, yeah. We tried Ambien. We tried all the basics beforehand. And, it was like drinking a cup of water. It just had zero impact whatsoever. I couldn't go to sleep. Or if I could fall asleep, I couldn't stay asleep. It was like my mind just would not shut down. I could not turn it off to go to sleep. And finally, hit on this medication is trazodone. It's designed as it's an SSRI, but it's it's used a lot off label for sleep. And that put me to sleep. And I had to take that stuff for 8.5 years.
Oh, wow.
That puts weight on you. So at the end of that, and to stop the free fall, I mean, I was put on Ativan. I took that for 8.5 years for anxiety. I'd have these horrible panic attacks, just crippling. Lay into bed, curled around a pillow, waiting to die kind of panic attacks. And it was really awful. And he put me on this medicine called Symbyax, which is a combination of Prozac with an antipsychotic medication, and that I can't remember the name of right off the top of my head. And that stopped the free fall. That stopped my mood from getting any worse, from kids playing in the yard from happening when there weren't no kids there. That stuff all ceased. But I slept for like 16 hours a day. I'd sleep 10, 12 hours a night, take a couple of 2-hour naps during the day. And I was just, I'm a creative musician. I wasn't just some guy that played. I wrote albums. I did all sorts of things. Just the sight of my guitar terrified me, because I knew that this medicine was really holding all this emotion and everything that was really wrong with me just kind of underneath the surface. And I didn't, touching that instrument might unlock all that. And I didn't want any part of that nonsense. But toward the end of, December 2008, I reached a point where I'm like, okay, I've come to terms with the familial stuff. I've worked it all out. I'm going to get better now. I don't need this crazy heavy duty anti-crazy psychotic stuff. I don't need to take that. I'll just stay with the Prozac, follow the directions on the Ativan, because the Ativan was PRN. It was as needed. And the Trazodone, I was sleeping pretty good, but I gained a ton of weight. I was about, I'm six. I used to be 6'2". Now I've shrunk down to where I'm barely 6 foot tall. But then I was still about 6'1". I was probably about 255, 260. And I look at my wife, and my mood's better somewhat. And I just look at her and say, "This is too fat. I need to do something. What am I going to do here?" And she introduced me to an article about the Atkins Diet. And this is where it gets really crazy, Caitlin, because I followed the Atkins Diet. Oh, you can eat all the meat you want, and you can eat all these, you can eat all the bananas you want. Well, I like that. Sure, no problem.
Bananas.
Well, at that time, it was fruits and, no carbs, no potatoes.
Yeah.
I was a really carb heavy somebody, tons of bread. I was a bread and taters kind of guy. So cut all that stuff out that I thought I needed to cut out, and the weight started coming off, but my mood got better too, but we never made the connection. I told my doctor what I was doing, and he was just like, "Well, you're looking good and your blood pressure's better, so just stay with it." But he never at any time said, "Well, of course your mood's better because you're not putting toxins in," or there was never, "Oh, let's explore this diet thing. Maybe there's something there." It was, okay. And he was going low carb too, because he was a big obese physician. Something I will look for in the future from now on, my next doctor. But he exchanged snack recipes with me. There was no investigate. There was no curiosity.
Well, I think also where you live is pretty behind the times.
Well, I was living in, I live in Jacksonville, Florida now. Then we were living in Greenville, South Carolina area.
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't want to besmirch a whole part of the country, but
it's okay. I'm from the South. I can say that.
I know you are. Yeah, I know you are. But I don't know that would have made a difference, but it could have played a role, because there were other doctors after him in that same area. I had a psychiatrist too. And I ran into all kinds of crap. I had a psychiatrist. I established a great rapport. She changed my meds, and part of the cycles, I would feel better for a little while. But right as I we start getting into things that I'm thinking behaviorally, I can fix this. She up and retires because she wants to spend more time with her children, which I can't fault that, but suddenly I don't have a psychiatrist anymore. So I have to go back to my doctor, who really, not to make excuses, he was a really good man. He was very concerned about, he gave me his cell phone number and asked me to call him on weekends to let him know how I was doing because he was so concerned about me. And he told me, he said, he had the most intractable depression I'd ever seen in my life. Because, I mean, they tried multiple different combinations of meds. I took, let's see, Prozac was always the foundational med, and then they added Effexor or Prestique and Lexapro. The Symbiox that I mentioned had Prozac with it. Then later, as I got worse, it would, Lamictal, all these antipsychotics and mood stabilizers, all in these various combinations. My brain chemistry was in a constant state of flux.
I mean, the theme I'm seeing, like, I mean, I've told you my mom has depression, and I've been to the doctor with her, and now she's off everything, but she used to be on with my coaching, but she used to be on all this stuff just like you. And I went to the doctor with her, and the thing that struck me the most was they don't ask you anything. They don't talk to you at all. It's just, here's this drug, here's that drug. They don't even, it's not, I mean, you think about psychiatry that's supposed to be like therapy, but it's not. They just throw a bunch of pills at you, and then they say next time. It's like they just adjust it a little bit.
Well, the good psychiatrist will take time with you. The lady that I mentioned, she would spend up to an hour with me. Whereas the next psychiatrist I had, if you got 10 minutes, you were lucky. I mean, it was awful. I mean, there was no, it was, how are you doing? And I would try to explain things. He's like, we don't have time for that. How are you doing? But the thing about, from 2009 to 2010, while I was doing Atkins, I had a good year. Now, I still had there were mood drops period. I was able to go to my 30-year high school class reunion. You could see the pictures. They're up on Facebook. My affect's pretty good. I lost a good amount of weight. Nothing like now, but, I was, my mid 40s. Late 40s. I looked pretty good. And I felt better. But then in like May of 2010, I'm like, I'd really like to eat ice cream again. Let's see. The worst that could happen to me is I'll eat ice cream, and if I gain the weight back, I could just go back on Atkins. Problem solved. Again, my symptoms my mind was already working against me. And this landmark thing happened. I'm at Mass on a Sunday evening by myself. I'd ridden my motorcycle there. And I'm a thankful Catholic convert. Mass is very important to me. And we're right before consecration. I'm on my knees in prayer, and suddenly I get this prescient red alert feeling down to the core of my being. If you don't get out of here and go home right now, something very bad is about to happen. And I mean, it was overwhelming. It wasn't a panic attack. It was like a warning. This is really, you need to take this serious, young man. I got on my bike. I literally ran out of the church. I didn't even get to the communion, which is just, for a Catholic, is just not a good thing at all to do. And in 10 minutes, I'm back at my house. I'm curled up on my couch and I'm crying like a baby, and I don't know why. And this is where the worst of the worst starts to happen, because that's when they start throwing the whole truckload of meds at me. And nothing, the same thing would happen. I would get better for a little while, maybe a few months, maybe a few weeks. And then just, my mood would crater. It was just awful, and it just got worse and worse. And then my wife's job got transferred to Jacksonville, Florida, and we knew nobody, no family, no doctors, nothing. I come down here and I have to start fishing for a physician. And the first lady I found, she was physician's assistant, which you can, here in Florida, they're able to prescribe meds and whatnot. And she had me try a thyroid medicine without giving me a thyroid test. And of course, trusting authority, being mentally ill, not being at my assertive best, I took that stupid thing. I thought the top of my head was going to explode, Caitlin.
Was your heart racing?
No, my heart wasn't racing. I just literally thought that my head was going to explode. It was like somebody had put a pressure jack on the inside of it, was trying to push out through the top. And I sent her an email saying, "What's up with this?" And she fired me. So I'm in this new town. My first doctor, I got fired. It's not a good place, but I find a nurse practitioner, interesting enough, who took the time, and she put me on Seroquel. And for a while, I thought that was the answer, because I had a really steady 6 months. I'm extremely creative. I wrote an album that was actually people still listen to a little bit on the internet. But I was never even anywhere close to right. And the inability to perceive things accurately was creating a nightmare in our marriage. My wife was exhausted. And fast forward to January 2015, my psychiatrist, the nurse practitioner, she left town to take care of a family member, of all things. So I'm with the last and final psychiatrist I'll ever have, not named Georgia E. She's not my psychiatrist, but if I ever have one, it's going to be her, or I'm not having one. He took me cold turkey off of Prozac and put me on this Latuda medicine. And he also told me I should seriously consider long-term hospitalization or electroshock therapy. So that's where I was. I would never wanted to end my life, but depression would have me thinking, okay, I don't want to do that. But if I was going to do it, how would I do it? No, I don't want to think about that. I'm Catholic. I have real strong beliefs about suicide, etc. I don't want to think about that. Let's get my guitar. No, but if you were going to do it, what would you do? And it's what my mind was always working against me constantly. And it just was destroying every aspect of my life. And thanks be to God, I was still able to function at a high enough level to where I was still writing, and I had this bunch of blues music that I couldn't sing. And there's a pretty active musician community in this area, so I put an ad in Craigslist, and this extraordinarily talented lady, I'm going to say her name here in a minute, her name's Kimmy Wade, came into my life, and she's watching a lot of this. She doesn't have a medical background. She's just a working musician, somebody. But finally one day she just looks at me and she says, "Have you ever thought about medical cannabis?" I'm like, what? Because I'd always been around it, but I had a bad experience when I was very young, and it just wasn't my thing. Beer was legal. I'd be the guy at band practice or at break time at a gig. I was the guy who was passing things, left or right. It just wasn't for me. But I did some research, and there was some anecdotal evidence that people were seeing some improvement. So my wife, we secured 4 grams of flour, which is just hardly anything. And my wife made some canna butter out of it off a recipe on the internet. And she made these little quarter-sized cookies. Little keto oatmeal raisin cookies, no sugar. I was scared to death of these things. And the first one, I only ate a half of it. And Caitlin, 15 minutes after I ate that cookie, I felt like 1,000 suns had lifted off of me. I wasn't high. I just didn't feel like crap anymore.
Wow.
And then 40 minutes or so went by, and this high kicked in, and all of my symptoms were gone. I mean, not just suppressed, they were gone. All the anger, all the anxiety, all the obnoxious, hypercritical, everything was just gone. Like, my wife come home from work, and I'm like, "Ha!" And she's like, Who's this guy? And so I started using it, just this little tiny bit every day. And 10 days into it, Caitlin, I'm tying my shoe. My belly's in the way. I'm like, huh? This isn't good. And my heart starts racing. I have a panic attack, and I go look in the mirror, and I see myself accurately for the first time in years. I weighed 289 pounds. I was just a heart attack, it was begging to happen. And my color was horrendous, and my skin was just horrible. My ankles and elbows, the skin was so dry and cracked, and my head was flaked out. It was just a horrible, disgusting mess. I'm like, this is unacceptable. Look at me. Huh? This is horrible. I don't want to die. I didn't get to this point to die of a heart attack. And I told my wife that night. I said, Atkins, immediately. And then I started walking the dog. And I was so terrified of hurting myself because I was so out of condition, so it was like a half a block, and then a block, and then 2 blocks, and then, well, geez, I wonder how far all these blocks are. And I got a little mapping program. And over the next 3.5 years, with a very imperfect, low carb, high fat diet, I walked off 94 pounds.
Wow.
By the end of 2015, because of the cannabis, I was off the antidepressants and all the mood stabilizing crap. By the end of 2016, I was off the Ativan. And at the end of 2017, I was diagnosed in 2016, late 2016, with hypothyroidism. And so I was on meds for that through part of 2017. But at the end of 2017, I was off the trazodone and the hypothyroid med. No meds, no pharma medicines since 2017 have passed these lips.
Wow, that's amazing.
But I still suffered from depression. I had to use the cannabis. It treated the symptoms. It did not eliminate them.
Yeah.
Fast forward to May of 2018, this same lady, same talented gal, Kippy Wade, says to me, messages me, says, oh my gosh, you got to go watch every video by this guy named Dr. Jordan Peterson. Okay. And I watched, these were his lectures and his talks. There was nothing dietary related. And I'm like, geez, this dude's been saying things I've been feeling for years. He's got incredible integrity. And of course, I saw all the Jordan Peterson Destroys videos, and he's just a masterful man with common sense, honesty, and truth. And I see this 30-minute cutout one day of him on Joe Rogan, and he tells about how Michaela, his daughter, figures it out through her experimentation and eliminates her depression symptoms along with her arthritis problems. I didn't know Dr. Peterson suffered from anxiety and depression. Had no clue. So I'm like, I'm watching this, and he's like, and he said, after the first week, my anxiety was 80% better, and my jaw's on the floor. And, and he's like, and you look at him, and he looks, and you go back, you look at him now versus his videos before he started Carnivore Diet, you could see the difference. It's plain as day when you know what to look for. And my wife comes in because I still don't trust what I'm seeing. I'm like, watch this with me. Is this really saying what I think he's saying? Because she's a huge fan too. I mean, we had the privilege of going to see him in Jacksonville, September of last year for a lecture. It was beautiful. So I start searching. The next guy I find is none other than Sean Baker on Joe Rogan. And Caitlin, I must have watched the dietary portion of that 50 times. Because Air Force combat surgeon, they just don't let anybody do that. You've got to have incredible integrity and be of impeccable character to get to that position. So here I've got these two extremely articulate gentlemen with great integrity telling me you can lose your symptoms if you do this. And I'm like, and then I see a talk from 2017 with Amber O'Hearn from Keto Fest where she explains how we literally came out of the trees and developed our brains by eating meat. And suddenly I had enough pieces of the puzzle. I'm like, I got to try this. I'd be crazy not to. Worst that'll happen, it won't work.
Yeah, you'll be right back where you started.
But to not try it would be worse, and always wonder. So I did a lot of reading. I joined the Zeroing In on Health group based off a video I saw. I think it was Kelly Hogan mentioned them. I saw one of her video interviews. And that was where I learned the basics. And I wanted to, because I wanted to succeed. I looked into it. And I was fortunate because at Zeroing In on Health, you got people that have been doing this for 10 years and more. And they've got this vast amount of knowledge, and their directions are pretty simple. That's what you were talking. I heard you mention what's about keto and measuring and all that stuff. And that's why I never tried. When I saw the ketogenic diet on paper, I'm like, I'm not doing all that. That's too much to keep track of. But the way carnivore is taught at Zeroing In on Health, it's eat only when you're hungry, eat till you're not another bite full, only eat the meat you crave and can afford. Don't put sweet taste in your mouth. There's nothing to measure. What's to measure? What's to worry? So that's what I did.
Now
go ahead.
You have an interesting take on fasting because, I mean, I guess you learned that there because most people in these new carnivores or whatever you want to call them, they are all gung-ho fasting like crazy. So what is your take on that?
I was taught you only eat when you're hungry, that you should never deny or ignore your body's cry for nutrition. And I was taught that this is one of the most important things in adapting to this way of eating. And I just wanted to not be depressed anymore. I had literally, for this, I'd flushed my ego down the toilet. What I wanted, my preferences, what I wanted to taste, could I do it this way? I didn't care. If they'd have told me, lick the pan for 5 minutes before every meal, I would have followed those ridiculous, because I didn't want to be crazy anymore. I mean, yeah, the cannabis treated the symptoms, but it didn't eliminate them. So I was dependent.
Zero dependent. It's just like another pill, kind of.
In many ways, you're correct. And, you know, I'm a legal patient here in the state of Florida, but it's incredibly expensive. It's very expensive. So with fasting, I believe it's a useful tool in the right situations, especially for the morbidly obese under the care of a doctor. I think it's dangerous territory to ignore your body's natural hunger signals, especially when you take into account the fact that because of the misinformation we were given, just eat 3 times. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now, we had that pounded into our heads from birth for decades. And then they changed it. You need to eat 5 or 6 times a day, small little meals. And you never reach a point of satiety. Your body and the crap we were eating due to oxalates, and there was no nutrition in it, and we were starving ourselves. That's why we were constantly hungry all the time. And I didn't get to be 289 because I wasn't shoveling food in my mouth with both hands. But I was starved. I was hungry all the time. And of course, I was mentally ill. I didn't piece it together till later. But that's why that's my stance on fasting. If you want to fast, if you think that's good for you, I'm not going to tell you not to. I'm not a participant in those things. I think it's something as a community we have to be very careful when we give out those advice. I'm very, let's do a 7-day fast. Well, let's make sure everybody understands what that means first. Because I saw a lot of people suffer out of ignorance that just jumped in on that and hurt themselves.
I mean, I think you have to be very fat adapted a long time, and it has to be natural, which I don't think I can't imagine that it'd be natural to not eat for 7 days. But because of my background of diet, such crazy dieting, and for as soon as you tell me I have to fast, it makes me want to eat more. And it makes me want to, and I mean, I've tried the 16/8 fast. Even that, I will stuff myself because I'm so worried about the time frames, and then I'm uncomfortably full, and then I'm upset, and so it's like it just sets off this whole negative pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I just don't worry about the time, I feel like I eat a lot just naturally. It doesn't, but I mean, some people I think can do it, but I don't think they can do it if it's just really, really natural for them, I think. But if it's any kind of torture, then I think it's the wrong.
I agree. And I had this experience, and then I'll get back to the other part of the story. Is I had a job selling cell phones in a retail environment. Beautiful opportunity. I was making great money. I was actually kind of good at it. But the problem was I couldn't eat when I was hungry. And inevitably, when I got the chance, I would eat a big enough breakfast. Okay, this is the day I'm working. This is when my lunch period is going to be. I'm going to eat enough, feast enough to where I think I'm going to be able to get to that point, and then I can eat. But a customer would show up, and I might be 2 or 3 hours past that before I could eat. On the second weekend after this job, my wife and I are on the other side of that door over there having a conversation. And suddenly this unusual argument developed. I thought it was an unusual argument. And it got kind of intense and heated. And finally she looked at me and she said, "You're not making sense anymore again. It's just like you were." I'm like, ooh, there's a red flag. I have not had, I don't cheat. Are you serious? I got my sanity back. I'm never risking that.
So was this when you were doing carnivore?
Oh yeah, I'm carnivore. This is April, May of this year.
Okay.
And the crazy comes back. Now, not the depression, but all the crazy part that was a factor, a part and player carry that depression. The inability to understand what my wife was saying was right there, and it was undeniable.
She saw it right away.
Oh, well, it took her about 10 minutes before she threw up her hands and said, "You're not making any sense again." And we've also she's learned that if that ever happens again, that's what she should do, because that's the only thing that would get my attention. Because to carry on the argument was just to feed into the crazy.
So you had missed your meal? Is that what happened?
I ate, but it was later. And what we figured out is meat is not just my food, it's my medicine. And when my body needs its medicine, it damn well better have it, or something's not going to go right very quickly.
Well, I think people also, they use the idea that we're supposed to be like hunter-gatherers, and then we can handle long periods of time between eating because that's what they did. But they didn't grow up the way we did on, Lucky Charms. So we need it almost in a medicine. We need it as a therapeutic dose rather than what they did. They never had all this junk and garbage that they grew up eating. So I think it's different. We almost have to do more than they do just to recover.
It's really remarkable. And my wife and I were like, well, there's no job worth this. And I had a great boss, and I kind of, the company wasn't going to change their policies for me. But the guy was really nice. He says, well, what you would need is a note from your doctor explaining this. Where am I going to get that? Sean Baker's not licensed to practice in Florida, and he's not my doctor. Who am I going to get? Yeah. And so I had to give up the job. But I'll give up. I'll live poor as a mouse. I'll eat the cheapest meat on planet Earth, but I won't go crazy again. Not for love nor money. I will never risk that. There's just no, it doesn't just affect me, it affects my wife. It affects my, everything I touch. And so when I started my carnivore journey, 10 days into it, Caitlin, I woke up, I didn't have joint pain. I didn't know that I suffered from joint pain until I woke up without it.
Yeah.
I had aches and pains. I was 57 years old then. I had a few broken bones. You fall down. You play lead guitar in clubs and bars. You jump up on tables. Sometimes the table gives way, or you're running around showing off, acting the fool, being an entertainer, and you slip on beer in the floor and your feet point to the ceiling, but you don't stop playing. Those add up over time. And you wake up without them. I was taking 2-mile walks in the morning then, and I still do. But I was like skipping down the street like a little kid because I could. Yeah. I mean, it was incredible. And the 24th day, I'm walking along and I feel so good, but then suddenly I can take I've taken pictures and posted them right to the spot. It was like this switch went off. And this wave of happiness and joy just washed over me like a torrential waterfall. And all the darkness and everything that was so bad for so long just went away, vanished. All the depression, all the rage, all the anger, it just was gone.
Wow.
Just gone. There was no choir, there was no angelic thing. I felt like I lost weight all over again. It was like this enormous thing was just awful, ugly thing was gone. And it's never come back. I've never had a down mood day since.
So that was in just 24 days after you started.
It was 24 days after I started. It took 5 months to get the anxiety gone. That took a little longer. And sleep's been a gradual improving thing that right now is more related to when I'm trying to get my salt situation squared away. Electrolytes, I had those cramps in my lower extremities, my feet, and my lower calves that will wake me up at 3 and 4 in the morning. And I've about got that lined out. This is a real salt thing full of Celtic salt. And then, of course, I have real salt. And then I've got the pink Himalayan. And I'm doing first hands-on research to see which one or which combination is going to fix this. Because I believe the answer lies there.
I mean, for me, it's just the amount. It's just the amount and not forgetting. And I have to take like a whole teaspoon before bed, either however I can get it in my body. If I don't, I will wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning with like a headache. If I don't, it's not a terrible headache. I know exactly what it is. It'll just wake me up. And then I'll go and take the salt, and then I can usually go right back to sleep till like 7. But if I take the salt before bed, I won't wake up till 7 by myself,
Well, last night was the first night in a week that I was not awakened with a cramp. It was glorious. 6 hours of uninterrupted sleep. Oh my gosh. I feel like $10 million. My normal day, I feel like $1 million. Today, I'm feeling like 10 million. Because that's just big difference.
How much salt do you take a day?
I haven't been measuring.
Well, maybe that's a start.
Well, here's my thing. It was one of those things I didn't think through. You got to realize, I'm a musician. I don't have a nutrition background. I'm a guitar player. The worst way for years. So, I mean, that's another reason why I keep carnivore so simple, is because I want to stay within my realm of experience. And this is working so well. I get really paranoid at just the thought of tweaking or whatnot. And a lot of 10-year vets don't eat salt. A lot of them find they don't need it to add it to their food at all. So again, it's that specific to the individual kind of thing. So we don't know what we don't know. I tried I used the magnesium lotion. That's really nice, but that stuff's $20 for 2 bottles, and that, who wants to waste that when salt's way cheaper? And so, I'm trying a little bit of everything. Plus, and I don't know if you've done it. Have you tried putting your salt in your bone broth and drinking some bone broth before bedtime?
Because when I started, it was kind of cold, so that's all I did for the first 6 months. Because I started in October, so then it was winter.
Okay.
And so I really didn't have salt problems at first because I was drinking bone broth every single day, and I put tons of salt in it. It was only when it started not being winter that I was like, oh wait, I have to actually focus on this now because my salt is all messed up and also it's hot, so I was sweating more, and and I wasn't drinking the bone broth anymore because it's hot. So I was like, okay, I have to figure this out.
Yeah, and I wasn't factoring in the fact, I'm in Northeast Florida. I'm walking 15 to 20 miles a week. Most of that's outside. I don't wear a shirt a lot of the time now because I'm skinny enough to where I don't scare the neighbors when I walk around without a shirt. And, it's a great way to make vitamin D, which is, fabulous for us. And so I'm not factoring a lot of these things in. I'm learning as I go along, just like everybody else is. It's not like we have a textbook where if X happens, then here's your answer. It's not like one of those telemarketer or computer troubleshooting cards, notebooks that they have at the call centers. We don't know what we don't know because there's no studies. Nobody's willing to pony up the money.
I do think maybe later on, years down the road, maybe we won't need so much salt. But again, with the therapy, it's just something we need right now.
Yeah. Well, I'm still healing. I know I'm still healing. I'm hungry 3 times a day. When I first started, I was eating 4 times a day.
Yeah.
I was starving. And I wake up every morning ravenous, just ravenous.
So yeah, you really are. I mean, well, that's good though, because I wake up and I'm not hungry at all, like until about maybe 10 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
And then but I'm not trying or anything. If I was hungry, I would eat,
Sure. I never eat unless I'm hungry. It's never a matter of time. But my body has regulated it. It used to be prior to carnivory, breakfast was at 8 o'clock in the morning, maybe 9. Lunch would be 12 or 1, and then, dinner 6 o'clock, 6:30. Well, now I've had breakfast and all the dishes are put away before 6 a.m. And then I'm hungry again sometime around 10:30, 11-ish. And then I'm able to go all the way to 5:30 or 6 o'clock before I get hungry again. I'm not following the clock. I'm genuinely just eating when I'm hungry. I usually wake up at 4 a.m. and those are also, I still use cannabis, but those are the hours that I'm cannabis free, stone cold sober until after I eat. And I use cannabis now still to help me go to sleep at night, and also because it helps me behavior wise. You don't come out of a 40+ year depression with a toolbox full of happy skills.
Yeah.
And what happens is the cannabis I'll be in the best mood, Caitlin. I'll have this same smile, and I'll be the most obnoxious, hypercritical, happy person you ever saw. Just because that was the way I behaved for so long.
Yeah, well, it's like they're not just like, sometimes my sister will say, what's wrong with you? And I'm like, nothing. Like I'm fat, I'm happy, I'm fine. But it's just like, it's almost like other people are used to you being a jerk or something.
It's true. And my wife, God bless her, if somebody's earned her place in heaven, she has for putting up with the nightmare that I put her through. Because she didn't know, she never knew how I was going to react to anything. I was so unpredictable. And a case in point, it had been maybe 3 or 4 weeks that I'd been using the cannabis. And I went to ask her a question. I was in a great mood. I'm feeling better. Life's getting better. And I just asked her a question and she flinched, and I'm like, ooh, that's a learned behavior response right there. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So, depression, mental illness in general, it's not just any mental illness. It ravages and affects the whole family.
Oh yeah. I mean, well, that's what, I told you my parents were divorced, and a big part of it, I think, was, my mother's mental illness was a factor there, and she's doing a lot better now, like I said, with all the coaching that I have done with her.
That's
and
awesome.
she lives near me now, so I'm able to help her and stuff like that. But anyway, so I know what you're talking about.
It's just, and that's one of the reasons why I do this. I know it's one of the reasons why you do it. It's because we didn't know. I was hopeless. I mean, I honest to gosh, Kayla, I didn't think I'd live to see 60. In January 2015, I didn't think I'd live out the year.
Wow.
I really didn't, because I mean, it was all coming apart. That doctor jerked my meds around, pulled me cold turkey off of Prozac with no type. Imagine if somebody took a warm washcloth, a warm wet washcloth, and rubbed it directly onto your brain. I had that feeling for weeks and weeks and weeks. And you may have read about, SSRIs and whatnot. You have brain zaps. Well, you get pulled off of something cold turkey that you shouldn't have, and you don't have. It's like brain bombs. It's just.
You could probably get some money out of that one.
Well, I looked into it, but there's this thing called what is it? A conflict of interest clause that this psychiatrist apparently had with every attorney in town. Imagine that. Anyway, it was rather convenient. But yeah, don't get me started on my opinion of certain aspects of doctors and the medical community, because I'll lose my mind.
So what is your typical, so you basically tell us what you eat, a little bit about your shopping habits and stuff like that.
Okay. I started out eating steak and eggs, and then eggs suddenly stopped being satisfying, and we weren't eating ribeyes. We were eating London broil cuts and things like that we could afford. My wife would find on sale. But then one day I'm in Sam's Club and I see these tubes of this 90-10 ground beef, and it just looked pretty to me. I can't say it any other way. And I looked at my wife and I said, I'm going to eat that. I'm going to try it. And it's been the most satisfying. It's the word I always come back to.
90-10. I always expected you to be eating 73.
Oh, it's extremely, I think it's because, we know protein builds structure and performs the healing in our body. And fats, where it gets the energy from. So I think it's because I'm still in healing, such a big time healing mode, that's why it appeals. It's extremely satisfying. And I also made sure, one of the things I figured out before I went carnivore from studying zeroing in on health was, a lot of people get bored early. They get frustrated. I'm only eating one thing, and I'm, food was entertainment, whatever. So I thought, I've never had a meal in my life where bacon was involved that I didn't enjoy it. It's not that bacon, I thought of bacon as my favorite food at the time. It's just, that just came to me. And so I've always made sure I've had bacon with every meal. And, it's a great source of fat. Who doesn't like bacon?
Yeah, well, that evens it out, so you're getting more fat from.
And it's just been the most delicious. I've been eating that every day since December. And I genuinely love every bite. It's like the day before didn't happen. It's like I'd never had it before. It's so good every time.
I know. And people don't get that, but they don't understand your what you want changes. it's almost like when you were a kid and you wanted cereal every day, and it was the best thing you ever did. But now it's like, now all you want is steak or eggs or ground beef or whatever it is. But you really crave it and you really don't have interest in other things. But nobody understands that, because you don't understand it until you do it. Because I would have thought the same thing. I would have thought, oh, I get sick of that. But it didn't happen.
If you'd have told me a year ago, I would, a year later, because a year ago at this point, I'm eating all sorts of things. I'm eating pork, I'm eating fish, I'm eating, but there's always bacon. Bacon was the one constant with every meal. And it's still mostly red meat, but it's a variety of cuts, whatever was on sale. And because we're not affluent people, we can't afford ribeyes every night. I mean, it's nuts. But I've locked onto this, and you're so right. I have no interest in anything else except if I could have filet mignon. Oh my gosh, just the thought of filet mignon, my mouth starts watering. Yes, I'll eat all of that I can afford. But I'm not against eating anything. What about chicken? Chicken's fine if you want it. If you crave it, eat it. I don't crave it.
Yeah.
And I don't feel deprived. I'm full. I don't think about food again until the next time I get hungry, despite the fact I spend my daytime now talking about it. I mean, this has totally transformed my life. I mean, music now is like it used to be my reason for waking up. And now it's like when the mental illness went away, it's like my muse went with it. Now, I know I'll end up getting it back because I've been on long hiatuses before, but it's really been sharing the truth that we don't have to suffer anymore is taking precedence.
So you're not playing music right now?
I still am working on the project with the lady I mentioned earlier. It's called the Dark Hearts Blues. And we've been working on our second album for a couple of years. She's had some health problems. And she lives in a town called Middleburg, which is like 50 miles from here. So she only comes here once a week, and we only have like an hour and a half to work. And that's, we get a little bit done as we can, so it's slow going. But all the songs have been written. They were written before Carnivore. And most of the recordings have been done before Carnivore. So I'm just kind of like producing. I'm not being that creative. I mean, she's the one really putting forth the effort now. But it's not that. I mean, I could not sit in this chair, Caitlin, and not have a guitar in my hand. I mean, 24, if I was awake, I had to have it in my hand, literally. Except when I was terrified of it. It was that important to me. And I believe it's because it was one of the ways I could express my illness and vent some of that.
Yeah. It's like a crutch, kind of.
In many ways, yes. In many ways, it was.
Well, Brett, so what do you want to tell somebody who's new and just getting started? And, what would you tell them to kind of give them some words of encouragement?
First off, you've got to be patient. Second off, it's important that you eat enough and that you trust your body. A lot of people, the whole concept of trusting your body is just foreign. What do you mean, trust my body? Because we've been at war with ourselves for so long. The other thing is to listen to your body, pay attention, focus on it. Only eat when you're hungry. When you're hungry, eat until you're not another bite full. Reach true satiety, fullness. When I am not another bite full, there's no question. It's not something I have to guess about. I could swallow the last bite, still be chewing another bite, and have to spit the bite that's still in my mouth out into the dog's bowl because I'm not going to swallow it. My body will not let me swallow that.
Wow.
That's not another bite full. And then I don't eat again until the next time I'm hungry. And I don't put any sweet taste into my mouth. That includes toothpaste. Of course, I have dentures, so I get around that. But if you don't wear dentures and you still have your teeth, there's a variety. There's toothpaste out there. You can also do like I did when we were kids and use baking soda. Brushed our teeth with baking soda for years with great success.
Yeah.
And I use the Listerine style mouthwash. No, and I do. The smell of sugar now literally sickens me. Walking through, for some reason, in grocery stores, you have to go through the cereal aisle to get the quickest route to the meat counter. I call that the Valley of Death, the Aisle of Death. And you can smell all the oils and the sugar and just, oh. And I can't stand those. All my old favorites make me want to puke now, just the smell of them.
Yeah, well, I think your senses are heightened a little too.
Well, I mean, I know it's poison.
Yeah.
For me, that
But
equals
I mean,
insanity.
on Carnivore, I think your senses are a little heightened than they used to be. Like, I can smell everything more than I used to.
Well, the absence of brain fog makes that possible just by itself.
Well, well, your story is really uplifting, Brett. I think everybody who's watching, is going to be very motivated to give this a try because, it's affordable. You don't have to see a doctor. You don't have to be hungry. You don't have to suffer. It's a really, really sustainable way to do it. And I'm so glad that it's helped you and your wife, and you guys are going to live a long time and be a lot healthier and less medicated. So congratulations.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. I'm a very fortunate person who was just blessed to get the right information at the right time in the right order.
Yeah, before it was too late.
Exactly.
So tell everybody what you're working on and where they can find you.
Well, I'm working on a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to try to get to speak at some conferences in the coming year, 18 months. And that's my primary focus, is always promoting carnivory. This has literally become my vocation now. Not to make money, but just because I believe in it so much. It's, so many people are hopeless. We've been taught to eat poorly. There are people who are suffering. I've got friends, I'm watching friends of mine dropping like flies from cancer. They're suffering from horrible arthritis. And
They think that's the only way.
A lady that I grew up with, share this quick story with. This was the reason this was the case that really made me take a serious look at what I want to do with the rest of my days. This woman's diagnosed with primary progressive multiple sclerosis. Mm-hmm. And she's 64 years old. She was told she could look forward to spending most of the rest of her life in a wheelchair. She saw what I was saying about what was happening to me with carnivore on Facebook for my first couple of months. That was the only place I talked about it. I hadn't done a carnivore cast yet or anything. And she comes to me begging me, tell me about this. This is what's happening. I fall down 20 times a day and all these horrible things. And they're telling me it's never going to go into remission. So I sent her to zeroing in on health and meatheals.com and to the same videos I saw. And Caitlin, 2 months later, she sent me a message. She fired her neurologist. All of her symptoms are gone.
Oh my gosh.
All of her symptoms are gone.
That's amazing.
She doesn't need a cane. Her tinnitus is gone. She doesn't fall down. She takes no meds now. No medicines.
That's amazing.
They told her she was going to spend most of her life, the rest of her, in a wheelchair, and it would never get better. So that's when I'm like, somebody's telling me something here, and this is, I'm not going to risk fate by not sharing this till I know everybody who needs to hear it's heard about it.
Well, I got a lot of work to do, Brett.
Absolutely. So that's what I'm working on. That's exactly what. And I like you. I share my experience and journey on social media. I've actually got a bigger Twitter presence than I do on Instagram. But I'm blessed.
Is it thankful.carnivore?
It's thankful.carnivore on Instagram, on Facebook and YouTube. It's just Thankful Carnivore, and on Twitter, where the meat-eating savages run wild. It's where it's crazy. You can find me. It's my old musician account. It's Stickman Bleeding. It's StickmanBleedin.
Oh yeah.
Please don't add a G. You won't get me.
I never go on Twitter. Now. All right, well, it's been awesome talking to you, Brett. I better get going here. I got another family thing to go to. So it was awesome to see you and get to know you a little bit. And we'll be catching up on Instagram. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. You have a great day as well.
All right.